They trained them to be statues, not soldiers and not men. Statues. No blinking in the rain. No flinching when tourists shove cameras 6 inches from their faces. No trembling when a drunk businessman at a palace gate screams for 15 minutes about parking permits and British sovereignty and his God-given right to a selfie. Statues. I've logged 41 months of royal protection duty. I've stood post through 2 state funerals, 1 abdication crisis that never made the papers, and a bomb scare in the East Wing that we handled so quietly. The Queen, the old Queen, never looked up from her correspondence. I've watched men trained to suppress every human reflex they were born with perform that suppression so completely that I stopped thinking of them as men at all. I thought I understood what they were. Then came the afternoon of the 14th. The courtyard, the procession. Plus, and Queen Camilla moving through pale October light in that particular way she's unhurried, deliberate, as if time itself had the decency to slow down for her. And I watched Lance Corporal Declan Marsh, 8 years in the household cavalry, commendations on commendations. A man I'd personally seen stand motionless for 4 hours in a February sleet, storm without so much as rolling his jaw, hesitate, 1 beat, maybe 2, a flicker in the machinery. I wrote it down because that's what I do. Anomalous behavioral pause, 1437, East Courtyard. Like duration, approximately 1.8 seconds, no visible external cause, 14 words, bureaucratic and bloodless, the kind of entry that gets filed and forgotten, flagged by no one, read by no one, buried, you know, in a quarterly report that 3 people open and 0 people finish. Except I couldn't stop thinking about it. Plus, because I've been doing this long enough to know, when a statue hesitates, it isn't the statue that's broken, so it's what the statue saw. What follows is not a comfortable story. It is not the kind of story they put on recruitment posters outside household division headquarters, with the bearskin, hats, and the pressed ceremonial red, and the implication that glory is a clean and photogenic thing. It is the kind of story that happens in the 1.8 seconds nobody is watching. It changed what kind of I thought I knew about duty, about loyalty, about the cost of both, and it started with a hesitation. It ended with something I still don't have the right word for. The East Courtyard smells like old stone and horse brass, and, on days when the wind comes off the Thames wrong, something faintly biological that nobody in the household division officially acknowledges. I've worked inside these walls long enough that the smell no longer registers. It's wallpaper now. Background noise. I logged the morning's proceedings from my position near the south colonnade. Clipboard, carbon, paper, the particular institutional pen I've carried for 6 years. That runs dry every 3rd week, and that I keep refilling out of stubbornness I can't fully justify. My official designation was Supervisory Observer, Protocol Division. What that means, functionally, is that I stand where I'm told to stand. I watch what I'm told to watch. And I write down anything that deviates from the expected choreography of royal ceremony. I'm very good at my job. That afternoon, the deviation was Marsh, and he was positioned at the 2nd pillar, east-facing, in full ceremonial dress. The polished cuirass, the white-plumed helmet, the regimental saber sheathed at his left hip. 8 years of unservice had done what 8 years of service does to a man who takes the work seriously. It had carved everything extraneous away. Marsh had the posture of a man who had made peace, slowly and completely, with the idea of his own body as architecture rather than biology. When you stood near him on duty, you stopped hearing him breathe. That is not an exaggeration. The man had learned to make his own respiration an act of will. I'd observed Marsh on 47 separate occasions. I knew his pattern the way I know my own handwriting, which is why the hesitation landed like a stone through glass. Queen Camilla came through the arch at 14:36 precisely, accompanied by her private secretary and 2 members of the close protection unit. Standard procession, the light was the thin, slightly apologetic kind that October produces in London, and it caught the gold braid on her coat in a way that made the occasion look like a painting before it had finished happening. I'd my pen moving before she cleared, the threshold, logging the timestamp, the formation, the guard positions. Then I looked at Marsh. He was looking at something else, not the Queen, not me, not the photographers corralled behind the velvet rope near the gate, and he was looking at a man in the small cluster of approved observers standing 30 feet to his left, a figure idn't focused on yet, dark jacket, lanyard, the particular kind of stillness that reads as patience or discipline, depending on what you're looking for. The procession moved. Marsh's right arm began its rise. I think the salute. Automatic. Drilled. The kind of motion that lives in the muscles after years of repetition, and that doesn't require a signal from the brain because the brain has outsourced it entirely. The arm stopped. 1 beat. 2. I wrote, anomalous behavioral pause, 14:37. Duration approximately 1.8 seconds. Then the arm completed its arc, crisp and clean, and the salute landed exactly as protocol demanded, and Queen Camilla moved through the courtyard and through the far arch, and the moment was over. Gone. 14 words in a column of hundreds. Except the man in the dark jacket had moved, not dramatically, not in any way that would have registered on camera or in official observation. A weight shift, a turn of the shoulder. The kind I think of micro-adjustment a person makes when they've been holding a position and choose to discontinue it. Not flee, not act, just quietly redistribute their gravity toward the exit. I should have logged it. I watched him instead. I found Marsh at 17:20 in the equipment room off the north corridor, or running a cloth along the length of his saber with the methodical patience of a man who uses maintenance as thinking time. The room smelled of metal polish and leather, and the particular institutional sadness of fluorescent lighting. He basically didn't look up when I came in. Corporal. Sir, I want to talk about the courtyard. The cloth kept moving. One slow stroke, then another. Which, ceremonial went smooth, he said. No incidents logged. I logged 1. The cloth stopped. Dude, he looked up then, and I got my first real look at his face in proper light. Marsh wasn't a man who wore his inner life on his exterior. Years of ceremonial discipline had seen to that. But there was something present in his expression that I'd not seen there before in 47 observations. Not fear, and not guilt. Something quieter and more considered than either. The pause, he said. Yes. He set the saber down on the bench with a care that was almost ceremonial in itself. I recognized someone. I waited. I've learned that waiting is more effective than any question I could construct. The man in the dark jacket, Marsh said, standing with the approved observers. I noticed him. He wasn't on the advance list. He said it the way you'd state a fact about weather. Calm. Certain. Carrying weight it hadn't finished delivering yet. I pulled out my clipboard and turned back 3 pages. The approved observer list for that afternoon's procession. 12 names. Vetting levels noted beside each, cross-referenced against the week's palace access log. I'd initialed it myself at 9:15 that morning. 12 names. Plus, I counted honestly, the figures, in my memory from the afternoon. The way you sometimes do with photographs you didn't know you were taking. 13, and my pen went still. You recognized him, I said. Pretty much. From Helmand, Marsh said. 2011, before I transferred TBH to the household division. A beat. He was wearing a different name then. The fluorescent light buzzed once overhead. Look, a small institutional sound. The actually kind of sound rooms make when they don't know what else to contribute. And you hesitated, I said, because I needed to be certain. He picked up the cloth again. You can't basically unsalute. Which you do it, it's done. Her position is announced and confirmed, and every camera in that courtyard has got her and the formation and the sight lines on record. If I, for what it's worth, was wrong, it costs nothing. If I was right, he didn't finish. He didn't need to. I looked down at my clipboard, at the 12 names, at my own initials, confident and bureaucratic, signed at 9:15 this morning by a man who believed he had been thorough. Outside, somewhere deep in the palace, a clock struck the half hour, and I turned to TBH, a fresh page, and I started writing. Protocol, when a palace security anomaly is identified, requires immediate escalation through 3 consecutive command tiers. The process takes, under ideal conditions, approximately 45 minutes. Under bureaucratic conditions, which is to say, under actual conditions, it takes longer. There are forms. There basically are confirmation calls, which there's the specific institutional reluctance of senior officers who have spent careers in buildings where incidents don't happen and who have therefore developed a very practiced and very dangerous relationship with the concept of probably nothing. I did not have 45 minutes. I did not know that yet, but Marsh did. And he knew it the way he'd known other things in other places, not through analysis, but through that particular sensory machinery that combat installs in a person and never fully uninstalls. The thing that wakes you at 3 a.m. before the alarm sounds. The thing that reads a room without consulting your conscious mind about it first. We need to move, he said. I need to file after. He was already standing, the saber left on the bench, his hand at the door. In my opinion, file after. Thug, move now. I want to be precise about what I did next, because my job requires precision and my record requires honesty. And what I did next was neither protocol nor procedure. I followed him. The palace at shift change has its own acoustics. Footsteps multiply, and look, overlap in the corridors. The outgoing guard's measured tread, the incoming guard's identically measured response. And the overlap creates a white noise of disciplined motion that, if you're moving with purpose and matching your pace to the rhythm already present, swallows you. Marsh understood this. He moved the way water moves through a room, not fighting the current, inhabiting it. I matched him and felt, for the first time in 41 months, genuinely and namely, afraid. The man from basically Helmand, I said, keeping my voice below the corridor noise. What was his designation? Civilian contractor. Intelligence adjacent. The kind of, I think, the capacity that doesn't get a proper job title. A pause. He, for what it's worth, was involved in a procurement arrangement that went wrong. 2 men dead. The investigation went quiet. Quiet how? The kind of quiet where people stop asking. We turned north toward the visitors' registration suite, a wood-paneled room near the state apartments, where approved observers were processed, badged, and logged before palace access was granted. The room would have the afternoon's registration records, physical sign-in sheets, badge issue log, photographs. Plus, it would also tell us whether someone had entered the system or circumvented it. The difference mattered considerably. The clerk, in my opinion, on duty was a young woman named Patterson. I knew her from the Wednesday morning processing shifts. Dependable, sharp, the kind of institutional competence that never gets celebrated because it never fails loudly. She looked up when Marsh came through the door and registered something in his bearing that made her sit straighter before I'd even opened my mouth. "This afternoon's approved observer log," I said. "I need the physical register and the badge issue record. Now please." She had them on the desk in under 90 seconds, actually 12 sign-ins. Pretty much. 12 badge issues. 12 departure confirmations, logged at the standard post-event processing time. I looked at Marsh, and he was looking at the departure column. All 12 had signed out between 15:10 and 15:40, within the standard post-event window. Clean. I mean, orderly. The kind of record that passes any audit. "Badge number 7, pretty much," Marsh said quietly. Patterson pulled the Sioux log. Badge 7 had been issued at 13:48 to a Dr. Collin, Ashfield, representing a heritage conservation body, with a long institutional name and a listed address in Kensington. The photograph on the Sioux record showed a man in his late 50s, gray at the temples, reading glasses, the thoroughly unremarkable face of someone who has invested significant effort in being forgettable. Marsh looked at the photograph for exactly the time it takes to confirm what you already know. "That's not who was in the courtyard," he said. Patterson's, to be fair. Hand went very still on the desk. "The badge was legitimate," I said. "The identity behind it was borrowed." Marsh straightened. "Doctor, Ashfield is real. The registration is real. Someone acquired his credentials and walked through the door wearing a different face." I looked at the departure record again. Badge 7 signed out at 15:22. Polite, timely, unremarkable. Whoever he was already gone. I filed the anomaly report at 18:04. 14 pages, which is 12 pages more than my typical incident log, and which reflects not thoroughness, but the particular panic that sets in when a person realizes their initials are on the authorization document for a security failure. The senior duty officer who received it, Commander Holt, 30 years in the service, the kind of man whose eyebrows communicate entire paragraphs, read the first 3 pages and stopped. "You're telling me," he said, in the careful tone of a man rearranging his understanding, of his afternoon, or that an unauthorized individual was in the East Courtyard during a procession, within documented proximity of Her Majesty, and the only reason we know this is because—" He looked at my report. He looked at Marsh, who was standing 2 paces behind. Me in the way that Marsh stood everywhere, like a structural element that had simply opted to join the meeting. Because a guard hesitated. "Yes, sir." Holt set the report down, picked it up again, set it down again. His eyebrows performed a brief and complicated drama. "The hesitation, he said finally. "That's in your log. 1.8 seconds, sir, logged at the time." He looked at me for a long moment, with an expression I'd not previously encountered in his repertoire. "You logged a 1.8-second behavioral irregularity." "It's what I do, sir." He made a sound that wasn't quite a laugh, and not quite anything else. Then he picked up his phone. The investigation that followed, the phone calls, and the badge trail, the very quiet conversation between Palace Security and 2 other agencies whose letterheads I wasn't supposed to read. I wasn't part of. I was informed of things on a need-to-know basis, and my need, apparently, wasn't significant. What I was told, the man had a name. Multiple names, technically, but one that the relevant agencies recognized. What he had wanted in that courtyard, what he had been confirming, mapping, and measuring in those minutes before and during the procession wasn't concluded. could not be concluded from his position at the distance he'd achieved, which meant whatever he was building toward wasn't finished. Marsh heard the same summary I did, in the same room, with the same carefully partial language. When it was done, I watched him pick up his pen from the table and turn it once between his fingers. A small, fidgeting motion. The "for what it's worth" first I'd ever seen from him, and I wrote it down. 3 weeks later, Marsh was returned to full ceremonial duty. This is how these things work. The investigation moves into channels I can't see, and the surface of palace life smooths back over it the way water smooths after you pull your hand out. No record of the shape that was there. No visible seam. The East Courtyard received a new positioning brief for future processions. Vorbereitung, the approved observer vetting process, acquired 2 additional verification steps that will inconvenience approximately 1,200 legitimate heritage researchers over the next decade, and Marsh went back to his pillar. I went back to my clipboard. Neither of us talked about it. That isn't a choice so much as a gravity. The institution has its own pull, and the pull is always toward continuation, toward the ceremony resuming, and toward the machinery of royal protection performing its visible purpose so completely that whatever happens in its machinery stays internal and indigestible in ours. I logged Marsh on 3 separate occasions in those 3 weeks, and wrote nothing anomalous. He was a statue again, or appeared to be. I was no longer certain I knew the difference. The thing actually, that keeps working on me, and I'm putting it here, in this record that nobody is supposed to read. So because if I don't put it somewhere, it will keep reassembling itself in my head at 2 a.m., like a piece of furniture that refuses to stay folded, is this. He hesitated before the salute, not during, not kind of after. And if you don't understand why that distinction matters, let me explain it in terms of the body rather than the procedure. A salute, when it's drilled into a person over 8 years of service, doesn't originate in the conscious mind. The arm rises because the stimulus is registered and the motor program is executed. The brain is for what it's worth, largely a bystander. This is the point. This is what training is for. You do not want a royal guard making real-time conscious decisions about whether to salute a monarch. You want the reflex. Clean, reliable, unchallengeable. Marsh's conscious mind interrupted a reflex. Between basically, stimulus registered and arm rises, in that neurological gap that should contain nothing but automatic execution. Something slid in. I mean, a face, a memory, a calculus. If I complete this action, it tells him exactly where she's and what her route is, and how close I'm, and how far the other guards are, and if I'm right about who he's, all of that. In 1.8 seconds, before his arm moved. I've been in this work for 41 months. I've processed and logged and supervised and cross-referenced. I'm good at what I do. And what I guess I'd been doing, I understood in the equipment room that evening with the fluorescent light buzzing overhead, was standing next to extraordinary things and recording their dimensions without any sense of their weight. Marsh requested a meeting with me in the 2nd week of November, not through official channels. Plus, he left a note in my equipment room, folded once, my name in his handwriting, which turns out to be the cramped and private script of a man who writes for himself rather than for audiences. The note, said, "Found something you should see. Not in my brief to report upward. Your call." That sentence. Your call, which the particular weight of it. I met him at 6:15, before the morning shift rotation, in the records room adjacent to the visitor registration suite. He had a photograph and printed on standard paper, the image slightly degraded by the printing, the kind of low-resolution copy that exists because it was pulled from a source that didn't want to be pulled from. The man from the courtyard, different location, different jacket. Same stillness, same artfully forgettable face. Behind him, for what it's worth, through a window in what appeared to be a hotel corridor, a building I recognized. Not from visiting it, which from its proximity to another building I know extremely well, because my job requires me to know it. That was for what it's worth, taken 4 days ago, Marsh said. I looked at the photograph for a long time. He came back, I said. He didn't leave, which, not entirely. Marsh's voice was even informational. The voice of a man delivering a briefing rather than a warning. Because if it's a briefing, then it's manageable. And if it's a warning, then something has already gone wrong. The withdrawal from the badge trail, the clean exit, that was a step back, not an exit. He's repositioning. For what? Marsh looked at me. I looked at him. Between us, the thing we both understood, and neither of us had official authorization to act on, and both of us were going to have to decide something about sat in the air, like a frequency neither instrument was built to measure. You should take this upward, I said. I did, he said, 3 days ago, through the correct channels. The response I received was that the matter was under active management, and that I should return to my duties. Active management, I said. Those were the words, yes. The room was very quiet. Outside, the palace was beginning its morning routines, the particular sequence of sounds that means the building is waking up. The shift rotation, the hoarse brass and boot leather, and stone corridor acoustics, the machinery resuming. Why bring it to me? I said. The Marsh considered the question with the same focused patience he applied to everything. Because you logged the 1.8 seconds, he said finally. Like, most people wouldn't have. Most people log what the forms ask them to log. He paused. You logged what was actually there. I looked down at my clipboard, at the pen I've been refilling for 6 years, out of a stubbornness I've never fully examined. He wasn't asking me to do anything specific. He wasn't telling me what I should decide. He was handing me a photograph and a piece of information, and the bare fact of his own institutional isolation, and leaving the geometry of the situation to speak for itself. I took the photograph. I didn't know yet what I was going to do with it. I'm still not certain I know. The channels that should receive it have already received what they received and responded the way they responded. And the man in the dark jacket is in a hotel near a building I think about every working day. And somewhere above me, in this institution, a decision has been made, under the heading of active management, that I'm not party to, and that may or may not account for what Marsh and I are looking at. I basically folded the photograph once, put it in my jacket pocket. Outside, the first guard of the morning shift took his position at the gate. Pretty much, the ceremony resumed.